Hey out there, my name is Marshall Sanders, and today I'm going to walk you through a professional rebuild on a 1997 Ford F-250 diesel E4OD transmission right here at my house. So hopefully this video will help anybody out there that's having theirs done at a shop, what to expect for their money, or if you're doing it yourself, more power to you. And I'm sure you get a lot of good tips from this video. So let's get to it. Well, here is the beast. As far as I know, it's never been into. And it had a transmission torque converter clutch slip code. It actually shifted pretty good, so I'm not expecting too much carnage inside. But before we get to the trans, little history on the truck. It's nice looking truck, body's in good shape, but when he originally brought it to me, I put it up in the air on the lift and realized that the whole truck was just rusting to pieces and falling apart mechanically. It's got a 4-inch lift kit, so before I did the trans, past 5 months or so, I've replaced just about everything underneath this thing. Including the spring mounts. They were like paper thin. Put new springs on it, all new rear brakes, the brake cables, the shocks, both fuel tanks, tank straps, sender units. Pretty much everything you see back here has been replaced except for the exhaust, obviously. Also put in a posi rear. Can't believe this truck didn't come with a posi rear in it. Had an open differential, so did that also. Some of the frame damage where it was getting super thin. After I got done with the rear suspension and differential, he took it to a body shop and had this piece welded in because it was kind of paper thin right there, and had the whole frame coated with bed liner, which it actually turned out pretty nice. Body's in decent shape. There's a few spots, but not terrible. I'm also going to put this down pipe on. It's a 3-inch diamond eye. This factory pipe is like flat. So apparently you get a little bit more horsepower once you put that pipe on, but I chose to wait until I had the trans out. You can see how much easier it would be to put that pipe in. And then on to the front, rebuilt the entire front differential assembly. This is the Dana 50 independent front suspension. Not a huge fan of these, but it is what it is. I offered to put a Dana 60 in this thing for him, straight axle, but he wanted to keep the original stuff, so I rebuilt the whole front differential, put all new U-joints in it, ball joints, bushings, springs, shackles, front steering suspension. Everything you see here is new. Brakes, all new. But you can see how much the twist is in the spring when it's on the rack. But I probably should have did a whole video on this front end. But it is what it is. Now let's get to the trans. All right, here we go. Obviously it's been serviced. It's got the high horsepower gold paint on it. And if you look at these bolts, somebody has 13s and 10s and 12s. I guess that's all they had on hand when they had to go back with it. Obviously the bolts must have been rusted. Not too bad, not all burned up. And the pan is pretty clean. A little bit on the magnet, a mushroom, nothing terrible. Now this is the accumulator valve body, and this is the solenoid pack. It's all one pack. has all the shift solenoids and the lockup solenoid and the pressure control solenoid all in one unit. And I'll go through these on a different video of the rebuild, getting more technically involved, but right now I'm just trying to tear it down and get an idea and an initial inspection of what it's going to need. Couple valves in there, nothing crazy. Separator plate. There's check balls in here. One here. One here. And one here. Three check balls. One. T30 Torx bits that hold the solenoid pack in. Definitely getting a new solenoid pack. The torque converter clutch wasn't slipping that bad. It just every month or so it would throw the light, and it's very possible that the main problem was the solenoid itself just being a little sticky. But the converters are known for having torque converter slip problems. I'm definitely putting in a heavy duty unit. Here's the converter right here. Definitely not going to skimp on the converter. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 solenoids. Pretty straightforward. I already had this off, but you can look at it's kind of how the whole truck was. See how rusted that is? The tip of it's about half gone. Obviously need to get a new one of them. Accumulator valve body. It's got 3 different valves. And then the pressure valve, which I'll explain later in a different video. This is the main valve body. Oh, another check ball. 2 other check balls. One there and one there. I haven't torn one of these down in over 10 years. So bear with me. I was a builder for 21 years, and now I supervise a truck maintenance shop. But I've always loved doing transmissions. Probably built 12,000 or so in the 21 years. Separator plate. Looks original. It's got Ford numbers on it. that later. All right, here we go. Bunch of check balls in here. They're all over the place. The kit actually comes with a diagram of the different years. All the different years can have check balls in different places. There's a little spring right here, little pressure spring, and there's a check ball that fell out, obviously, right down in here. Don't want to lose it. All the little pieces. I'm not going to worry about the check ball locations at the moment. I'll figure out that when I go back together. If you're really not confident about getting the check balls back in the right place, then you can mark each one. See right here, there's no check ball. If you put a check ball in there, you're going to be in big trouble. So a lot of times you can just put a tiny little X where the check balls are. Like that. Now that I'm doing it, I'll just go ahead and do it. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up 8 up here. Get that out of there. 8. Not one there. I think that's it. Go on. All right, you got 3 center support bolts, which I'll explain in more detail because they're very important bolts. You got Loctite on them. This is the selective shaft that moves the manual valve in the valve body, and also it connects the park mechanism. If you look back here, when you put the car in park, it locks the gear, and now the wheels can't turn. Pretty simple and effective. This is the second gear over engine braking servo, which I'll explain that once I get the trans apart. See if I can get this out of here. Nah, we'll worry about it later. All right, on to the pump. Could have done that with a rubber mallet, but I'm being careful. There's the input shaft. Pump assembly. I like to tear the transmission down in chunks. So basically I'm going to go through the pump in a minute. Pulling out the Overrun Clutch drum now. This is a cast drum. The later ones, the 4R100s, have a stamped steel. Just checking my gears. making sure there's no pitting or overheating or anything on the Overdrive sun gear. Looks pretty good. Now we start the bearings. So I'm gonna keep the pump, the drum. Just keep going into this thing. There's a snap ring. See my screwdriver, this is pretty cool. Put a little notch in the screwdriver. That way you can grab your snap rings easy. Oh, yep, we got the Overdrive clutch. 3 clutches, not burned up, looks pretty good. Some of the lining's starting to wear off, but after all them years, that's gonna happen. But that looks pretty good. Now, if you notice, this snap ring popped off. Now this thing, every once in a while, it would have kind of a hard 3/4 shift in the overdrive. And that's part of the issue, just because the return spring was putting no pressure. But they make a spiral snap ring, which I'll show you in the other video, to take care of that problem. Common problem. And you always put the spiral snap ring in. The Overdrive planet assembly. I'll get into that. I'm going to tear all this apart, explain it better. Just want to get a little deeper into this thing. Overdrive apply piston. Always want to look at all where the seals ride. Make sure they're not boogered up or scored. If this transmission had a lot of metal run through it, all this could be scored up and you just take some sandpaper and clean it up, but this looks fine. Another snap ring for the center support. This is going to be tough. It's got pressure on it. Just got to work it. Get it. All right, just working this snap ring out. You hit the center support and it, because there's pressure pushing back up on that snap ring. There's a special tool to get this back together. But more snap rings. Little center support. This is kind of a neat center support because it has the apply piston for the overdrive on one side and the apply piston for second gear on the other. Same thing, got to check all your surfaces where the seals ride. Nothing crazy here. I don't expect too much because there wasn't a lot of metal and it actually worked pretty decent. Now that's the spring I was fighting that made it difficult to get that snap ring out because it was putting all the pressure up on the center support. This is the main center support. Looks good. Sometimes these center supports wear pretty bad here in the case. This one actually looks really good. A little bit of wear there, not bad. All right, keep on going. These are the second gear clutches. Take them out a little bit. Got a pressure plate 3 clutches, obviously. One, a little bit of burn marks on there, not too bad. Steels look good. They don't have any hot spots on them. May end up reusing these steels. Always putting new clutches in, obviously. But that's the second gear stack up. Alright, this is that servo I was talking about. This is your second gear engine braking band. So when you have it in manual second, the band comes on, and that way you get engine braking. Without it, there's a second gear sprag. Without it, when you let off the gas, it would coast and that sprag would slip, and you basically have neutral instead of engine braking. So that's the point of this band. We're just going to keep going here. This is actually the direct drum. It comes on in third and reverse and overdrive. Going further here, everything's looking pretty good so far. No carnage. I didn't expect a lot, but forward clutch, it's on in every forward gear. It's off in reverse. Front ring gear, getting into the gear train of it now. It looks pretty good. Oh, forward planet, aluminum. Interesting. Just checking for gear wobble, any kind of bluing or hot spots. Obviously another bearing in here. Check these bearings and just pinch real hard and spin, and you're trying to feel for any kind of crusty feeling, or it's really smooth. This one's good. Most of them will probably be good, but you always got to check this, because all it takes is one bearing come apart and your rebuild is pretty much useless. Now this planet is going to be upgraded to a steel planet. I'm surprised, being a diesel, that it had an aluminum planet in it, but it is what it is. Sun shell, sun gear, rear sun gear. You had the overdrive sun gear here, and this is the rear sun gear for both planetaries. I'm going to try to get this case out of the way so I have more room on the bench. That way we can see it better. More snap rings. And rear planet. Aluminum also. Checking for gear wobble. Again, checking for any major wear points on the gears themselves. Now, I'm going to look at these better, especially once they're cleaned up, but right now I'm just trying to get an initial inspection. Everything so far looks pretty cherry in this thing. Thrust washer, got a little wear on there, not too bad. All right, still going. I just want to get this all apart so I can get the case out of the way. There'll be a lot more room to show the rest of the transmission. But there's a snap ring that holds the output shaft in. See if I can get that. Being nice today. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes to get those snap rings out. Rear ring gear. And rear load drum and sprag assembly. But I'll explain that later. and the low and reverse clutch, which is the last clutch to come out of it, snap ring. And pretty typical, not burned up. Some of the clutch material's gone, but steels look good. No hot spots, no bluing. As you can see, there is a lot of parts in these things. Another bearing. Feels perfect. There's the output shaft. Just checking for any bushing wear, any overheating. Check the splines and make sure that they're not hammered out. And that's all the splines, not just one. That looks fine. I've never seen one of them strip out. This is that part ball. And thrust washer in the back. And we're getting close. We're getting close. I'm gonna tip the case up. Now I got to get these bolts out to get the rear sprag race off. Drop. Not that it would hurt anything, but you get that?
Yep.
The rear sprag race. That's what rides on this. Now this goes in here like this, and this is locked to the case. Now this low drum will only spin one way. It spins clockwise and locks the other way. Now this is called a roller clutch, obviously because it's got little rollers. But they make a sprag assembly, which I'll show you on the second gear sprag. I'll show you the difference between the two. And then one more, the low piston. Which, let's see if I can get this out here. Try to do this without making a mess. If you come over here, see that little hole there is where the fluid goes through to apply the piston. So I'm just going to apply air. Let's go back to the drum. Pop it right out. Easy peasy. And that piston applies these low reverse clutches. Pushes up that way. So that's everything in the case. I'm gonna get rid of this case out of the way. Got a little room because obviously 8-foot bench isn't quite long enough to do the whole thing. So at this point, I'm just gonna put things a little bit in order so it's not as confusing. We got the low reverse piston, the return springs. Got the low drum. I'm looking for any hammering where the clutches go. Clutch is flying around this here, and once it's applied, that's what keeps this from turning. So the clutches can eat into the drum, but it looks fine, no issues there. No hammering where the rollers go on the Sprag. Drum looks good. So I'm gonna lay this out from the back of the transmission all the way up through the gear train, and then I'll start on the clutch packs. So you got the low reverse drum, low reverse clutch, which I'm just gonna set right on the piston. Then we got rear ring gear. Checking for any looseness between the hub and the ring gear itself. Generally not a problem. Looking for any major wear in the splines. That all looks really good. No issues where the thrust washer rides. It's nice and smooth. Little 600 sandpaper and that'll be happy. And we looked at that planet before. That's the rear planet. Then you got your another thrust washer and the sun shell. Now you can see right here where it's been hammering. I'm gonna have to change this right here. You see that? And that's where the direct drum splines into this. Like that. It's just been hammering. Being a diesel, I'm not surprised. Not terrible, but it's getting changed. So obviously, sun gear bushings, pretty much changed all the loose bushings. A good way to check this is just put it on the shaft where it rides and just rock it. See how it's got a little bit of play there. I'm definitely changing them bushings. But pretty typical for a 130,000 mile diesel. Nothing crazy. So we got sun gear and shell. Now we've got the front planet, which that's getting changed out to a steel planet. Being a diesel, I'm surprised it didn't have a steel planet in it. Front ring gear. Again, make sure it's not loose. Checking the splines. This is where the forward clutch splines. Make sure it's not hammered out. Don't have any real deep gouges where the clutch teeth ride, which it looks perfect. That all looks good. Then we got the center support, and I'll talk about this more later, but as of now, this looks really good. I don't think we're gonna have any issues with that. Thrust washer, plastic thrust washer. They last as long as they don't get overheated, and they don't make metal. That's one of the reasons I like about them. When I first started building, I hated plastic in my trans, but they don't make metal, which is a good thing. So basically this is where sealing rings ride, and make sure that's not grooved out. That's where the forward applies. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and do a little demo here. I'm gonna put that back on. This is the direct drum on your center support. So this is how the clutches get applied. I believe this is the direct. Yep, if you look at the clutch pack, when fluid comes through here, it goes through the channels in the center support and applies the clutch. Pretty cool. So we got the center support. We got the direct drum here. Now this is the direct drum and the forward drum. Generally tear them down at the same time. Now I'm going to put a D on this snap ring for direct. And I'll put an F on this snap ring because they are selective. It just, matter of fact, I'm going to put a T on this, top forward. That way I know that snap ring went in that drum at the top. They're the same diameter, but they can be different thicknesses, which Yeah, they might be the same, but you can adjust clutch clearances with your snap rings. Direct clutch looks good. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's got 5 clutches in it, being a diesel. There is a trick to be able to get 6 clutches in these, but I don't think I'm going to do that to this truck because he doesn't do any heavy duty towing or anything. It's more just a personal vehicle. That looks good. No real hot spots on the clutches or the steels. This is the actual sprag I was talking about. It goes one way, locks the other. Turns one way, locks the other. So when it hits second gear clutches are on this sprag assembly, and it locks this to the case, and it holds the direct drum from moving. If you're questioning it at all you got to do is put a little arrow which way it turns. Free lock. You get this backwards and it bad news. Just looking for where the sprag assembly itself rides. This is called some people call it a dog bone sprag, because if you look at these things, the sprag itself kind of looks like a dog bone, each element. But there's no rollers. That's basically it. It lets loose one way when it spins, and it gets forced and locks the other way, as opposed to the roller clutch. That's the difference. Roller clutch, sprag. Both do the same thing. Another plastic thrust washer. Forward clutch here. It's on in any gear, any forward gear this clutch is on. Put it in drive and you go forward, it's always on. It's not a shifting clutch. Again, looks pretty cherry. This has 4 clutches in it, and I'll probably keep it that way because it doesn't have to be super heavy duty. All looks good. Another thrust washer. All right, now there's a snap ring down at the bottom. That's why I wrote top on that one. And it just makes it a lot easier when you're going back together. You know exactly where things were. On this one, I'll just write bottom BF, bottom forward. So Belleville spring, that's the return spring, as opposed to having return springs that look like this, that release the piston. It just folds up and folds down. It's not broke. Definitely going to change that. This wave rides on the bottom of this. That way it doesn't wear the aluminum piston out. Lip seals. This thing is cherry inside. There really isn't a whole lot wrong with it. Just the mileage and the age. Another bearing. Checking my bearings. Inner seal, which is a O-ring. That's a lip seal and an O-ring for the forward clutch. Pretty straightforward. Again, the apply piston, making sure it's not all scored up where the seal rides. There's a little bit there. Yeah, there sure is. Look at that. Now that's not from metal, that's just from doing this in the bore. But if I can't sand that out, I'll end up replacing it. It doesn't look too bad. I've seen worse. Checking the drum, make sure there's no wear where the steels ride. Making sure there's no cracks. Checking the splines on the inside of this. More thrust washers. And sealing rings. All that gets replaced. It comes in the kit. So that drum looks pretty good. This is where the direct clutch rides. Check them. Don't see any major wear there. It looks really good. No issues. This has a direct apply piston and the, matter of fact, let's just go ahead and do that too. Take the handy dandy press tool. And get that snap ring out of there. Come on. And come on. Boom. And again, return springs. That returns the piston. All right, it don't want to come out yet, so I'll just use air. Still easy. And again, I'm checking this piston. Make sure there's no crazy wear where the lip seals ride. That looks really good. No issues there. It's got a little bit there. Nothing crazy. The lip seals are on in the drum on this one. And obviously there's bushings in here, which I'll probably change. Again, checking bushings. You just stick it on the center support. Oh, I gotta get the sealing rings off. Now, it is better to check these when the transmission's been cleaned up, because that fluid takes up a little space in there. So it'll actually be a little bit looser once everything's cleaned up. But just for video's sake, put that on there and rock the drum. See if it rocks at all. That's tight. As of right now, it's super tight. No big deal. But it's a good way to check the bushing. All right, forward, direct. Trying to keep this somewhat organized so you can see, so it's not too confusing for anybody that hasn't built a transmission. Taking all my lip seals off, just prepping it. Right, got the band, clutch, and clutch. All right, just take it. Let's go. All right, onto the overdrive section. We got another bearing, obviously. Bearings and thrust washers. There's always a bearing or a thrust washer between any metal part. Just checking my bearing, it's fine. There's another, where's my pick? Lost my pick. This way. Make it easier. Come on out of there. Snap ring. Another roller. This is a roller clutch assembly, the Overdrive. Spins one way, locks the other. Don't expect anything really to be wrong with this. Looks really good, no issues. Looks good where the rollers ride. Clutch splines look good. And the Overdrive Planet. The original ones from like 89 to 94, 95, they put aluminum planets in these, and that it would just bust the splines clean out of it. That was one of the upgrades that Ford has done over the years. Again, just checking my end play, checking the gears, and I'll check all this stuff again once it's cleaned up and all the fluids out of the small places inside, because that can take up some of the clearance. But this looks really good. Another bearing. Splines look good, not all hammered out. More thrust washers, more bearings. Got to check every single one of them. Overdrive hub, that's where the overdrive clutch goes on, and you can see where that snap ring popped off. It's kind of been spinning around, but it didn't cause any damage. And then these are the splines that actually spline into the forward drum. Check your splines that way too. Perfectly fine, no issues. And Overdrive Planet, Sun Gear, all good. This is the Overrun Clutch. This also gives you engine braking. And this just has two clutches in it. Which definitely the clutch material's wearing off on that. Wearing down. Looks good though, no big deal. This has a bevel return spring and the apply piston and the aluminum piston in there. No big deal. Just put an OR on this. Overrun. Put it in the basket. Looking for any spline wear in here, outside, and obviously there's another bushing in there. I'll be checking that once I get it all cleaned up. And then the sealing rings, these sealing rings here, right in there. So make sure there's no major wear there. All looks perfect. The pump. Last piece of the puzzle. Bearing, check it the same way. Haven't found a bad bearing yet. Another thrust washer. They're still pliable. If this thing got overheated and crispy, when you bend it like that, it would just break. Good way to test them. stator. And all the fluid. All right, the stator has the lockup valve over here, which I'll talk about more later. And over here, it's got the pressure regulator valve and boost valves, which I'll talk about more later. Right now, I'm just looking for pump wear. Don't see where the pump gears ride on the end of the stator. Make sure that there's no major grooving, any cutting in it. Looks really good, nice and smooth. Little 600 paper there, and that thing's happy. So that'll be going back in. No issues with the splines. And again, there's bushings in here, which I'll put the input shaft on and check them once I get it cleaned up. But that looks really good. Then we got the pump and the pump gears. That's all it is. I'm gonna mark the one, put a little X on it. That goes up. This one you can't get backwards. You can put it in backwards. If you do, you're in trouble. But it will only go one way. The converter splines right to this, and if you put it in backwards, you'll jam the converter in the engine because the converter can't go far enough back. So obviously that goes out like that. So these pumps don't really have a whole lot of problems unless a lot of metal's been run through them. Major wear point is on the outside. Looking for any scoring. I'll probably end up just putting new pump gears in it anyway. But and then you want to check inside where the converter rides. Very important. That can get hammered out. See how it's starting to get shiny. Bad ones will be all hammered where the converter rides all the way through there. That can be hammered out thousands, 10,000s, 20,000s on some of the bad ones. Not bad though. And then obviously make sure there's no major scoring where the pump gear rides. And then the bushing, that'll get changed. Kind of strange looking there. I don't know what happened there, but that's, if you look down at that bushing, there's some scoring on it. Kind of funny. I mean, it's getting a new converter and bushing, so it's not that big a deal. Just kind of some weird wear there. And then obviously your pump O-ring. That's pretty. 23 years, not too bad. Still a little stretchy. I don't think this trans has never really been overheated, which is good. Can't say that for all of them for sure. Back up. All right, that's about the sum of it. Going from the back, it's just kind of laid out there. A lot of parts, but totally manageable if you do it a piece at a time. And I'll have another video on once I get this thing cleaned up and start rebuilding it. And I'll go through everything again as I'm building it so you can really see exactly what I'm doing. Thanks for watching.